So why on earth would an Australian marine biologist who cruises around the Great Barrier Reef want to travel all the way to Canada to check out the marine life? The Salish Sea. It's cold and it's barren. Well, the thing is, you couldn't be further from the truth. The Salish Sea is an intricate network of coastal waterways located between the southern western tip of the Canadian province of British Columbia and the northwestern tip in the US state of Washington. Now we're going to go out and meet a couple of people to help us find out exactly what is in these cold waters so we can find the secrets of the Salish Sea.
Hi, I'm Chris Cook. I love the ocean. Come along with me on my adventures, and we'll see what we can find. And maybe, just maybe, you'll fall in love too.
So people at first may think that there's not a lot to see here because it's cold, but what do you see when you dive down here?
Oh, I see a multitude of things when I go down there. I see giant Pacific octopus that can change color, change shapes. They're amazing creatures. They're like the superheroes of the ocean. They're very cool. There's sea pens, which are beautiful quill-like pens that are bright orange in color. I see lingcod, which are great, big, huge, nasty-looking fish that really are fairly benign when you actually come up to them. The one thing about the lingcod that really strikes me is that there's so few of them anymore. There used to be probably about 95% more than there are now. We've reduced their stock so much that they're an exception rather than the norm. Salish Sea is kind of a term that's finally accepting the original indigenous peoples of this area. And it actually is a term that's now used transboundary. So whereas before we used to call this area the Georgia Strait here in British Columbia, and down south of the border they were using different names as well. Now we've joined with a Cross the Border initiative called the Salish Sea. One of the things that really makes the ocean here so beautiful is come wintertime when there's no algae and plankton bloom, the visibility clears up just like the Caribbean. So you go down there and you see wide expanses, 80 to 100 feet. You can see clearly just like you would in the Caribbean. The only difference being it's green toned as opposed to an aquamarine color like you have in the Caribbean. And that's one of the things that really strikes me here is that it really has some true beauty to it if you get the time to go down there and make the effort to take your courses and that sort of thing.
And so your experience with the Salish Sea, how did you come to this place where you wake up every day and you want to preserve it?
Well, I think what did it for me was I spent a whole lot of my time scuba diving in the ocean. And what's really become apparent to me after 38 years of diving is where I used to see schools of fish, now I'm seeing either individuals or I'm not seeing any fish. And that's really giving me a passion to bring it back to its former health.
You're actively involved in conservation of this area. Can you touch on those groups and where people can go to look into that further?
Well, my organization, Marine Life Sanctuary Society of British Columbia, is the only organization that can actually claim to have created a full no-take marine protected area. There's a lot of misconceptions out there that the marine parks that we have here in British Columbia are actually protecting something, but in reality there's no protection whatsoever for the organisms living within the park. So one of the challenges that we have as conservationists in the area is the fact that people have a conception that there is protection when there really isn't. Canada protects less than 2% of its ocean, and we have the longest coastline of any country in the entire world.
I'm Caitlin Birdsall, Caitlin Birdsall, and I'm a research assistant with the Cetacean Research Lab at the Vancouver Aquarium.
So the Salish Sea, there's a lot more out there than people realize. What can you say about that? I mean, obviously there's killer whales, there's humpbacks. From your experiences in research in this area, what is it that's out there that people don't realize?
Well, I think a lot of people don't know about a lot of our smaller species of cetaceans. So we have quite a few different small species like harbor porpoise, Dall's porpoise, as well as Pacific white-sided dolphins that a lot of people don't recognize at all. The dolphins actually represent a really interesting story in that they were really rare in the Salish Sea up until about 4 or 5 years ago. And slowly they've started to move into this area, and we're actually seeing them quite a bit now in Howe Sound, which the entrance is just around the corner here. So that's something that's pretty new for people that have lived around the Salish Sea for many years.
Actually, can you tell me about this? I saw some amazing photos where there were killer whales right here. So what happened?
Yeah, I think people always associate killer whales with really wild coasts and very remote places, but they actually use the area right outside Vancouver sometimes, particularly transient or big killer whales, which are the mammal-eating types of killer whales. Anywhere that there's seals or sea lions or some of these small cetaceans like harbor porpoises, they tend to show up. So we did have a group of transient killer whales that came in right here into the Broad Inlet last year. More often we see them out in wild places, but they do show up every once in a while. Unfortunately, killer whales face a lot of threats in and around the Salish Sea. It's a very busy area. It's an area with a lot of human impact. One of the biggest threats to killer whales is unfortunately the accumulation of toxins in our marine environment. Particularly things like persistent pollutants that don't break down in the environment really accumulate up the food chain, and killer whales being the top of the food chain really accumulate a lot of these toxins, which may affect their abilities to reproduce, to have proper growth, and to survive essentially. So making sure that our water is clean up and stay clean is really important for killer whales. Another big threat to killer whales, particularly resident killer whales, is the decline in prey as well. So making sure we're managing our fish populations, making sure that we're choosing sustainable seafood choices is really important to make sure that there's enough appropriate food for these animals out there.
Cool. I was going to ask you what people could do, but that's probably it. They could basically eat sustainable seafoods. I mean, what else can people do?
So watching what kind of sort of chemicals you're using in your home, and also choosing things that have reduced amounts of chemical use is really important for making sure our marine environment stays healthy. If you're a boater, another great thing you can do is if you're out there around these whales, enjoy watching them, but do it at a distance, give them their space, make sure that they have the room to do what they need to do.
Why is the Salish Sea worth saving?
I'd say it's worth saving because it probably has some of the highest species diversity of anywhere on the planet. It's worth saving because at one point in time historically it was highly abundant with fish stocks, and it could feed so many people given the opportunity to come back.